Now, according to UNICEF, we are facing a global food crisis, which has been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. Children in the Horn of Africa are already suffering a deadly form of malnutrition. For more on this, I'm joined by Victor Chinyama from UNICEF Somalia. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. We saw that inflation here in South Africa has hit a 5-year high, and things have become expensive, the price of food, fuel and electricity, but it's a global problem. Exactly how bad is it?
It is a global problem. It is bad. And in countries like Somalia, it's even worse. So in the Horn of Africa, which you alluded to, these countries have been facing a drought for the last 2 years. And the drought has literally wiped out their livestock, their means of livelihood, and their ability to produce crop. And what we have seen in Somalia is that has forced people to leave their homes to come towards the urban cities in search of help. About 7 million people so far and counting. That's almost half the population of Somalia. But even more worrying is what impact it has on children. So we're looking at 1.5 million children potentially facing malnutrition in this country. That's half the population of under 5 children in Somalia. This is a crisis of the likes of which we have not seen in a very, very long time. And the Ukraine situation has simply compounded what was already shaping up to be a difficult scenario. And what we have seen is an increase in some places of as much as 72% in the price of grain. And this is simply beyond the reach of most people.
Severe acute malnutrition is very dangerous. Talk to us about exactly what it is and how it impacts children.
So it is called wasting, and what that means is that the body mass undergoes a rapid deterioration, and often that is caused by a child either having diarrhea or having measles, and all these other illnesses that could very quickly lead to the child dying. On top of that, then you have this child having malnutrition. And if there's anything we have learned in Somalia, it's that when you combine malnutrition with diarrhea, with measles, that death comes very quickly to children. And so while we are worried about preventing malnutrition, ensuring that children that are malnourished are quickly put on treatment, we are also worried about the prospect of disease outbreaks such as cholera and diarrhea, and measles even, which are already being reported right across this country in numbers that far exceed what we saw last year or even the year before. And our worry is that when you have this situation of malnutrition and then you have diarrhea and cholera and measles on top of that, that you could very quickly have children dying in large numbers.
Yeah, and this really has a detrimental effect, affecting the possible future leaders of the continent. What are you calling for as UNICEF? Because G7 leaders are preparing to meet at the G7 summit to discuss a number of issues. This should really be one that features quite strongly on the agenda.
We are warning. We've been warning since last year that this is a crisis that can very quickly get out of proportion. And what we have seen in the Horn of Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, and even Kenya, is that the situation is getting worse. Our appeal to the G7 leaders is to look again at the amount of money that we need in order for us to respond, in order for us to save lives. In the context of Somalia, we only have about half of the $112 million that we need to respond between now and December. And if only half of your funding needs are funded, that means there's children that you will not be able to reach. And that is a crisis that we simply cannot afford to happen on our doorstep. The window for responding is there, but it's closing, and it's closing fast. Now is the time to act.
How will you respond? I mean, as you make mention of a response, surely there must be some strategic intervention to ensure that the response is one that's sufficient.
Immediately, it's to save lives. And we do that by identifying children that are malnourished and children that are at risk of becoming malnourished, ensuring that those are quickly put into a treatment program. And the treatment is not something expensive. It's a peanut butter paste called ready-to-use therapeutic food. That is all a child needs. And a box of that costs about $48. A child put on that treatment for 2 weeks is very well on his or her way to recovery. It's also to ensure that we provide clean water, because this is a water crisis. People have not seen rain for the last 2 years, and so they would drink any water, whatever water there is, and some of this is contaminated. So it's to ensure that we can provide water by drilling boreholes, by trucking water to these communities so that they have safe water to be able to drink. But in the broader UN community, we have other partners such as the World Food Programme, which will provide food, is provide shelter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Let's leave it there for now. Victor Chinyama from UNICEF Somalia, speaking about new figures that show that since the start of the year, the deteriorating global food crisis has resulted in an additional 260,000 children suffering from severe wasting.